Testing. Hey, hi, Stephanie.
Hey, Joe, how are you?
Fantastic. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'll be on for, until about 5:25. Then I'm gonna have to shoot over to the Souhegan School Board meeting that starts at 5.
You have a 5:30 one.
Yeah, 5:30 and a 6. So the 5:30 is a brief Souhegan meeting and 6 is when the SAU meeting starts.
Got it.
Never a dull moment. Because he stacks everything on top of each other this year.
Do you know what's going on at the 5:30 meeting?
Yes. So this is the part that's part of my language, back ass word. But he's asking all the school boards to approve him hiring and taking that director of curriculum at the SAU and putting it as an assistant superintendent to start January 1.
Got it.
But if the budgets don't pass, it just means that position is going to happen no matter what. So he kind of back-ended it around everybody.
If the budgets don't pass.
He goes to a default budget. He's still going to do what he wants to do at the SAU level no matter what.
Right. So I still have a big issue with the default budget being absolutely identical to the proposed budget. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, you made me really think when you mentioned the idea of policies versus the
Contracts?
Contracts.
Yeah.
That would be a very different way of thinking, and it'd be very interesting what people's reaction would be.
Well, because I've raised the question before. We treat this policy like a contract. And this was a big debate last year, at least with me, which was we didn't even have a policy that had been agreed upon when we were doing the budget initially.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the default budget still had all the increases that were reflected in that policy. And my concern or my question had been, this is a evergreen contract.
Yeah.
Until somehow a policy gets changed, those raises, the raise schedule stays in place forever. And so unlike a collective bargaining agreement where when the contract terminates, everybody gets frozen, and therein is the leverage to create some movement. That doesn't happen in this. At least we don't approach it that way.
Right.
And
right.
Last year, there was no way the default budget should have been, with including all the increases and all the compensation across the board. Didn't make sense. And frankly, given that you guys can change the policy with any vote that you want, I don't think legally, I don't think it holds water personally, but.
Joe, I missed a lot of things what you just said at the beginning, but along the same lines is what I'm tired of is that they will cut a teacher or an administrator only to turn around and rehire that person, in the same budget line.
We actually, Howard, we talked about that at what's today? Today's Thursday, at our Tuesday meeting. And I think it was Dan noted that Bill Hagan is still on the payroll. Porter Dodge is still on the payroll. Help me out.
So it happened to a few people. So Stan, who he was supposed to retire and was not supposed to continue. He's back this year, even though his position had been eliminated and he was retiring. He's the one that helps take care of the theater and does some other work around the school. He is working this year. They brought him back, for, I don't know, they call it, I think what he's doing is he's babysitting, I'll call it babysitting, the classes where kids are in person, but the teacher might be remote. So he's probably sitting in a classroom, making sure the kids are behaving and doing what they're supposed to do. But yeah, there are multiple positions. And that's partly why I asked the question that, he's eliminating at the SAU special ed position. Are you bringing that back again, or is this it? And he said he's not bringing it back. So it'll be interesting when he tries to rehire Lisa Femio-Ho, who honestly is fantastic. What happens? Yeah. Because she's on sabbatical.
So I feel like I'm really far behind because of no internet, no email. So I don't even have a copy of the budget to look through. So I know that I have lots of questions, and it goes back to last year where I stood up and made the try to keep our campus security, only to be turned down and have the principal take over 2 jobs. And to my understanding, he can only be there 4 days a week anyway. I don't know if that's still true.
Or Bill Hagan he can only work up to 1,300 hours a year.
But still draw that kind of.
He's only there 4 days a week, is my understanding. Yeah, Adam said that position is gone at the end of this year. He is not being rehired. My issue with that was that we found there was a $12,000 payout for his healthcare benefits. We don't give that to anybody.
And it's a $70,000 position.
Right. So these are absolute concerns, and this is why Adam's getting beaten up over this a little bit this year. And I think keep asking the questions.
Okay. So the purpose of this meeting was actually the continuation of just going through this kind of a discussion, but I would like to be able to have this on a section by section basis so we can move a little easier. I know that Charlie, you actually put your report together. I don't know if it made it out to everybody. That was probably my fault if I had not circulated it. But like we did on Tuesday, if you don't mind, Charlie, if you want to just give like a high level intro and we can ask some of the questions that we might have and see where we go from there.
Before you do that, Joel, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry to interrupt, Charlie, but Joel, you were absolutely right about the budget, the facilities budget being a decrease. I unfortunately, since I was having such a hard time navigating through the budget spreadsheets, I had downloaded only a piece of that budget. And so I was really reflecting those items that had, were representing an increase, but overall the budget actually did decrease. But I believe that Michelle indicated that that was partially responsible or a result of the bond, there not being a bond payment this year. So I will drill down even further and revise my report so that it reflects more accurately, the decrease from budget to budget. And I apologize.
Not a problem. So I'm just looking at that line item right now, and the principal on the bond last year was budgeted at 155,000, and that has gone away. And then there was a transfer to school maintenance ETF for $100,000 last year, and that has gone away. So that actually reduced this year's budget, those two, I would call them capital items, it appears, by $255,000.
Yeah. But I think that that transfer to capital maintenance, I think we're going to see another request to move money into the capital maintenance fund to keep building that fund.
Right.
I don't know if it'd be 100,000 or something like that this year.
Was that the 100,000 that was part of the warrant article?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it comes in as so that even though this shows up in this budget, it was actually approved separate from the budget that we had actually looked at earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one by itself doesn't really count.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We asked the voters for it. They said yes. We got it and put it aside. So we'll probably see that same number again this year as a warrant article or something similar to it.
Right.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Just
Sorry.
before we start again, because Stephanie has to leave at 5:30 for a Souhegan school board meeting, and then there's another one for the Souhegan school district meeting at 6 o'clock. 6. So you can all day, every day.
Yeah.
John, welcome.
Finally got through.
Finally got through. Thank you, sir.
Hi, Mr. Brown. How you doing?
Good, John. How are you?
Hanging in for an old man.
They finally let us in with these.
Yeah, finally got talking Yeah.
Yep, spent too much time today working on that one for you guys. Okay, Charlie, why don't you take it away?
All right, perfect. So I did try to email the SAFC joint email. So if you did not receive my report, please let me know. I'll send it to each individual who didn't receive it. But, I had a great meeting on special education. Really quick high-level overview, because I know this is a tight time constriction. So overall, special ed is 24% of the budget, significant portion. Year after year, I think I mentioned last meeting, this is my third year. And, Jeannie, I know you've had special education before. Typically, they cannot share too much because there's a lot of privacy concerns over sharing, which students need different services. But I did feel like Meg did a good job explaining specific needs that she definitely had. So the overall budget's at about 4.8 million. It is an increase over the FY21 at about 6%. And it's actually a significant increase over the 3-year average of about 32%. And a lot of that, if you weren't on the committee last year, was based on the fact that they took a lot of the students that they had traditionally sent out of district and moved it to in district, which was a true, I think, savings to the overall SAU, but an increase in this specific special education budget.
Hey,
So-
hey, Charlie, can I
Yeah.
just interrupt you for a second? I think I remember the number being something like $8.8 million over the last several years. And to me, and Mike's on, so I'll tee it up for you, Mike. It seems to me that is a number that needs to carry forward every year. We're justifying spending a significant increase in the special ed budget, right? And it's not just because we want to spend the money. We're actually doing it in a very, very responsible way. I don't want to steal your thunder here, Charlie, but this was the conclusion from last year as well. If you read the report, it makes a lot of sense, and it really needs to be kind of front and center, in my opinion, of how you present the budget or how it's evaluated.
Absolutely. And I think there's a huge business case on it. I think, one of the things that came up with George Torres from the school board, he was also at this subcommittee meeting. He talked about, Meg needing to present some sort of, slide that's within the budget that really talks about the overall vision of special ed at Souhegan, because I think there's a lot in here that, we need to get out to the community so they understand, what's making up sort of this increase. Because when you do look at it, it's pretty staggering, but there's that backstory that's critical. So I can add some notes to this report reflecting that as well. So I think, the big high level changes, there is definitely a salary increase of 176,000 that sticks out at the top of the budget. If you look at all the separate line items, you would think that there was some offsetting there. There is the IDEA budget line item that is at the bottom that has been reallocated back into the teacher salaries that end in the 0.33333. So that made sense to me.
You went way too fast for me on that one. I apologize.
Yeah, no. If you scroll down to the bottom of the special ed budget, there's this IDEA, which is a grant that they receive for special education, I guess.
I thought it was the idea budget.
Idea budget. Yeah, that's what I thought too. I was like, what is that? Special ideas.
IDEA, yes.
That's what I thought it was.
No, it's a
Mike-
grant.
Yeah, I asked the question like it was an idea, and yeah, definitely got the lesson. So it looks like it was a $200,000 line item in FY21, and they're reallocating that for 22 in the line items that end in all the threes. So it's the teacher salaries, the teacher guidance, it ends up moving into more salaries. So I did reach out to Meg and Michelle today just to get a better understanding of headcount, because I think that was the one thing that was not spoken about in my subcommittee meeting, because I would like to kind of pair this up. The quick response I got back today was that there is a nurse position that they believe needed to be filled that potentially is in here. And there's also potential retirement in an undisclosed position at this point that was not in here. So Mike, I don't know if you have a better explanation on that potential retirement. Meg did send a follow-up to Michelle today, so I can hopefully get that back and report at a later time.
My question is, why is the nurse in the special ed education? Shouldn't that be in the general budget?
Yeah, is there a separate nurse for special ed? Because there hasn't been in the past.
No, I know.
So my guess, and I have to look closer at the personnel, that there's probably a student that needs certain medical support that we have to provide. So it could be a specialized para with a medical background. I'd have to follow up with Jen Hewitt or Meg to determine, but I'm sure there's a logical reason for it.
Yeah, Meg is really on top of things. She's
Yeah.
incredibly on top of things.
Is it probably
Yeah,
to,
somehow I missed the nurse in special ed.
is it something to do with the prescriptions they're going to require? That it needs somebody to be control of that?
No, I think it's more, they probably have some disabilities that require medical support. Typically, that's what it is, but don't hold me to
Okay.
that. Don't, because if it's prescriptions, the school nurse can handle those, but I'm assuming it's going to be some sort of, medical condition that requires
Okay.
support.
I think we need an explanation for it. So when we do our presentation, we can answer the question.
Yeah, so I'll get more clarity on that. Again, Meg's been a great resource and has definitely been very, very responsible in a short amount of time. Before I go over any specific line items, I will share, I think, one of the facts when you're looking at this, and again, the increase, to everybody's belief, including those members of the school board, was that it's a slight increase for knowledge that we don't really have a number. When I looked at it originally, I saw that the budgeted pupil count is pretty flat year over year. So why would there be any sort of increase? And, Meg was very good at explaining the fact that, there's so many additional services that are needed. And what they're seeing from a statewide basis is a lot of additional services being required due to social type development, anxiety. Again, they can't give a specific number, but they're seeing those increases, from a statewide area, and they do look at specifics from grade to grade that are entering the school each year. Going into the line items, I'll tell you, again, I think she's really thoughtful at the work she does. I questioned some items on here. One was a issue for a workbook that seemed that it was an increase, and she said that what it was is the crisis prevention or crisis intervention workbooks. They do the training annually, but the workbooks they try to recycle, and this year they just have a need for them. Additionally, there's a tests that are done for development and different disabilities. Those are not done every single year. They're done as required. So, they have that at zero. So she does go through every line item and zeroes out what is not needed for the specific school year. There is an increase in there for some computer software. That software is to track behavior data that is needed this year. So that made sense to me. And then, there was nothing budgeted in any sort of new equipment. And, she had a great explanation that in previous years, there was specific need for Braille, as well as some other equipment for hearing impaired students. And again, the thoughtful part of this is that she went through and that those needs are not there at this time. So she did have those removed as well. And then just one other note, I think, looking at some other savings is this residential placement. There was no need for that, so that came out. But again, there's this increase in overall salaries that I just am trying to tie back. So that is a follow-up item I have at this point.
So Charlie, the salaries that you have, difference between headcount versus salary increases, and right?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get the head count dialed in.
Got it.
The nurse position I would not have anticipated would be in there. So I'd like to see kind of exactly who they have in this budget.
I recall that there was an expectation for 1.5 FTE increase for special ed. I don't know how it was broken out between teachers or assistants, but that's just sticks in my head. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, one was a para. And
That's right.
And what's the other? Were they going for another BCBA?
A regular teacher?
Well, no, a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst. They help develop plans that work with the kids that are high needs. And they're incredibly certified. And
Okay.
I need to go back and look at my notes, but I think that was.
You're saying they want a full-time employee for that? Couldn't they do that under contract?
Yeah, but that even costs us more because then they start charging per hour. And the past experience or the bills are even higher than hiring somebody that can work across a group of students.
Even with all the ancillary things we put on the salary?
It
Okay.
used to be. Now, I haven't looked at it this year, but in the past, yes.
In
I know
that,
in the past, we used to contract it out. That's what I'd say, only
Yeah.
when they were required.
Yeah, and then we have to transport the kid. The problem is then we have to transport the kid to where the BCBA is, and that's another $200 round trip per day that they're transported on top of the BCBA hourly rate.
Yes, I think that was the one comment she had brought up was for that, if there was a specific need, that's where the increase would correlate. There is the special ed physical therapy line. That is a slight increase due to contracted speech services. So they're seeing a need for that next year. So that they did choose to contract out.
but that one is level year over year, pretty much 1,500.
Exactly.
Really
Yeah.
small increase. There is one that there's still a big number on, and I'm looking for it again, which was outside tuition, special ed out of district tuition, which surprised me because I was under the impression that we were doing it all in-house.
So I have, we just recently just saw there is a student that is just now being taken out of district. It's someone who the district is not capable of handling in-house. There's significant needs. So those kids are
Okay.
placed.
I mean, we had 617,000 last year, special ed out of district tuition,
Yeah.
going up to 734 this year. So it's 117,000 increase. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's, I guess we're not allowed to know what that actually equates to, but
Well,
No,
I
I
do
can
know they're
tell you-
sending some kids to Milford, like 3 times a week.
For
some-
vocational ed,
Yes,
yeah, vocational ed is different than the special ed, but yeah, they do go
Okay.
over there.
no,
Okay.
these are special ed kids.
Are they're going to Milford?
Yeah. I know that.
I can ask the question.
John, why are they going to
I have no
Milford?
idea. All I know is that my son takes them. Okay,
Okay,
I'll follow up with that question this week, see what I get back.
well, I'm looking to see why it increased.
So,
You
yeah,
know,
so
are they
that's,
sending more kids or?
so I can say, I have another role. I look at all the manifests that come through and I have not seen, I do see when there's or people being driven where. I don't know which kids, but I have not seen the one to Milford, so I don't know if
Yeah.
that's new. I know there's vocational ed kids we take to Milford.
Okay,
and it could be part of that program.
just in your inquiry,
Transition.
just don't say John said so,
No,
you know?
it could be one of those
I don't want to
transitional.
get my son in
programs.
trouble.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, it could be one of those transitional learning programs that special ed provides. So when kids start getting, reaching a certain age, we help, we're required, depending on who the kid is, to help provide services to give them some sort of training so they can do something when they graduate. And it can be, going to a grocery store, it could be some light manufacturing, it could be working in a food store, depending on their capabilities. So it could even be that where it is a vocational ed, but a more transitional services program. So we
Yeah.
don't know.
and we are obligated to provide services for these kids until they're 21, is what I recall.
Yeah. Also in the special ed budget, did they talk about the 2 vehicles they're buying, Charlie?
They did not.
So there's $70,000 in the budget to purchase 2 vehicles. There currently are vehicles that they're being used, but they are 2010 vehicles that have very, very high mileage. The amount of maintenance work that needs on them, it's piling up to a point that it just makes more sense to purchase new vehicles. And these are vehicles that kids are transported to these transitional services. And it's a lot cheaper for us to have these two vehicles than to pay for Caring Hands to transport these kids at $200+ a day.
Who's
to go out.
driving these vehicles?
So I asked that question. So they're paras is what Meg told me. And they are qualified, certified, and insurance. It does cover them.
The parents.
Paras.
No, paras,
Paras.
The paraprofessionals.
paraprofessional.
Parents, okay. I thought you said parents. I'm like,
Paras are driving the cars. Yeah.
Is
Sorry,
that,
paraprofessionals are driving the cars.
is the cost of the the vehicles in the special ed budget, or is that in the,
Yeah, it's
Well-
$70,000.
That's in the transportation budget, though.
here we go. Which is a great segue.
We covered that as part of the food service and transportation, and that's really the biggest budget driver for that part of the
Yeah.
budget. If it wasn't
Yeah.
for that, there'd be a bit of a decrease, but that is not the case.
I just want to say before Stephanie leaves,
Yeah.
this is what was missing last year. We now have someone from the school board who can enlighten us on things that we're just not clear about, or that we, just information that she or he knows that we is very useful in making our decisions. Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, I think there's
Agreed.
I think we need this because it allows all of us to work together way better.
Absolutely.
plus
Yeah.
So just so clarification, I sent a text to Jen Hewitt about the Milford. We do send one special ed student to Milford with one paraprofessional for the culinary program within their CT program.
So yeah, so it's that combination of transitional.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Great, thanks.
All right. I think Mike, are you going to the Souhegan meeting or?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to that. So
I'm
so
on
you
the
guys are all
road.
set? You guys have anything for me?
We'll let you know.
Yeah.
I don't think we're shy.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. Maybe we'll catch up to you
Thanks.
at like 6 o'clock at the SAU meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Stephanie.
Bye.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Bye.
Mark, do you want to, you in a position to talk a little bit about the food and transportation?
Yeah, I can certainly talk about it. I apologize, my report document is not finished yet, so I'm working from just the notes. So I'll improve that a bit before I send it out. But Stephanie just covered the transportation aspect of our discussion. The comparison, there is no the vehicle purchase versus what we would be paying per trip. And I believe the number is $250 per trip, would quickly add up and overtake the cost of the new vehicles. And as Stephanie also mentioned, this is the way that this has been done, but the vehicles that have been used are they're old and high mileage and due for replacement. So there's a $70,000 line item for the purchase of 2 new vehicles. And we talked a bit about that, and she covered most of the details. 4 to 5 kids on average are at these. This is to take the kids to community-based transition facilities, essentially work sites. These are opportunities for the kids to get some time at these facilities. And there's about 4 to 5 kids on average that are accessing the opportunities. And as Jeannie mentioned, the support goes to age 21. So this would be really at the tail end of that, as the name implies, transition facilities. So the current vehicles that we use for that were purchased in 2010. So 10 years, probably overdue for a replacement. We asked about the program that this is done under the auspices of. This is a life skills program for which we currently have preliminary approval from the Department of Ed. I don't know whether there's an update on that, but we'll have to find out if we're received final approval for that. It was noted that the site visits in question were suspended due to COVID. So that's why the final approval is still pending. As so many other things, it was suspended. So that's, any questions about these new vehicles?
Mark, do they use both vehicles at the same time?
I don't have information on how often that happens, but I believe that it's not an unusual occurrence for the two vehicles to be needed to travel to two different sites
Yeah.
at the same time.
Is it standard practice to put that kind of expenditure into a operating budget as opposed to somehow splitting it out into a capital? I mean, it seems like a relatively large, not, it's not an annual expenditure that you would expect. So it's going to create that one-time spike in the thing. And I just wonder if we have a cutoff between what's capital versus what's O&M.
Well, if they use those vehicles across the board and be able to use those vehicles for like small sports teams when they're not being used, for what they're using it for now, that would save us money because you wouldn't have to have a bus service take, like the bowling team or the golfing team someplace. If they could use those vehicles at the same time, I could see why they would want to use the budget itself to buy those vehicles. It would save money in the budget by using those for.
Oh, I'm not suggesting that there's not a need for them. I'm just suggesting, how is it that it shows up as an operating item as opposed to a capital replacement item? And I just might not be familiar with how the school system has to do its budgeting.
I don't think that there's a separate, unless this were being done as part of a special capital expenditure for which we have a special fund set up, that would be the only other place where this could go. But as it doesn't fall under that heading, it does go into the operating budget. But as you say, it's a one-time expense, so this budget will drop commensurately, in FY23 without this 70,000 in there.
You want to wager on that?
Come on.
Line item.
Come on. Come on, Joel.
I have a question. I wonder if somebody else is also driving the vehicles, and where are they stored and who has the keys? That to me is like an open avenue for anything. So I look at it that it should be on a capital expenditure. That's the way I look at it, if the other people are using them. Not a line item, as an increase in the budget. It should be capitalized.
It would be
Like Joel
interesting to find
says.
out how they're managed, that's for sure. But I do have to say that my memory is that we used to spend a fortune, transporting kids all over the place, to out of district locations every single day.
Mhm.
And I can't help but think that this is, peanuts compared to what we used to spend to drive everybody all over the place.
Yeah, Judy, I'm not suggesting that it's not a legitimate expenditure. I'm just curious, when they put the budget together, whether it should show up somewhere else. And, for example, if can it only be used for special ed because it came out of the special ed budget?
Right, that's a
Or
good
is
it-
question.
It's not in the
Yeah.
special ed budget. It's part of the.
Oh, I'm
transport.
sorry. You're right. I'm sorry. Take it back. I asked that question once and I got the answer.
So in theory, it could be used for other things because it is
Yes.
not, quote, owned by
By
special ed, but that's what its primary use is.
Mark, do they have a policy of how to use the vehicle? Where it's stored, who keeps the keys, who can use it?
We didn't cover those. We didn't cover those details. We talked a lot about why they're being purchased and what the two vehicles that they're replacing have been used for, but we didn't get down to storage, key possession, and
It sounds like a need for a policy for that, because I can see it being abused down the road. And if we have a policy, then it's not going to be abused.
Okay, well, let me take that one back.
I bet you there is one in the 27 pages of policies that are on the website somewhere. Mark, question for you. I think I recall hearing that the school bus contract is up for renewal this year.
That is correct. And at the time of our subcommittee meeting, which was on November 4th, we did not have any bids in. The RFPs were out, but there weren't any bids received at that time. That was a couple of weeks ago. So where we left it was that the budget will be updated when the bids are received.
And does the number that the number that they're putting in this year is the same as last year? I'm looking at school bus contract, 284,000.
Yeah, take a look at that. I'm sure as a placeholder, that's what was put
Well,
in.
that's what I was kind of curious about. Is it an expected placeholder, or is it, we don't want to tip our hand of what our budget might be, or
No, I think right now, yeah, the FY22 matches FY21. So that's just a placeholder until a new contract is established.
and do you think any indication which way they think it's going?
We didn't. We had Meg in the meeting to speak to the special ed vehicles, but she's not in tune with the regular ed transportation budget as much, so we didn't get into any predictions of where that was going to go, except to say that the RFPs were out and we will see a revised budget number once the bids are received on that. So let me follow up on that, see where we stand.
Okay.
So Mark, do you know if they make an attempt when there is a new contract or even when there's an old contract to try to create efficiencies and, based on where people live and enrollments, whether they reduce the number of buses, increase the number of buses, you know what I mean? Make adjustments for that?
I know exactly what you mean, and that's always been the case. That was I'm now going back to my days on the Ways and Means for that other district, and every time the bus contract would come up, that was always we're always looking for efficiencies, because if you can drop a bus route, that's where you're going to get your big savings. So I'm assuming that is taking place as part of this process. I don't know if it would be possible, or if it's thought to be possible to significantly change the routes and get some savings there. But I can follow up on that one as well. Again, we didn't have anybody in the meeting who could speak to whether that was being looked at in the past. We've gone into the RFP process for the contract with an idea that could happen or not happen, as the case may be, as opposed to, put the bid out for contract for the current routes and then negotiate a reduction. If there had been a significant increase or decrease in the school population since the last contract, then you would look at, all right, there's got to be some changes made here. Otherwise, it stays, pretty much stays the same. And then you're looking at competitive bids, fuel prices, labor costs, etc. But your big change would be if there was a route change or route removal, bus removal.
Do I assume that the SAU puts that RFQ together? RFQ, request for quote?
No, I think that because if it did, that'd be part of the SAU budget. And it's part of our, well, because we're sharing those routes.
I didn't ask if the SAU, I asked if the SAU puts the actual quote together. The RFQ for them to bid on it.
I don't know the answer to that.
In the past, Betty used to bring it to the board for us to discuss it.
Right.
And it was at the
The
SAU.
the former business administrator, Betty Schenkel.
Got it.
Right.
Michelle, the old Michelle.
Yes,
Right.
old Michelle.
Thank you.
Well,
Some of us refer to Michelle as the new Betty.
Even before Adam. Yeah.
but what she would do is she'd bring that to the SAU because it, like you mentioned, it is a joint venture with all the districts. So all the districts had to play into it.
Right.
And I was also going to comment that at the beginning of the year, I stopped driving the school bus within the last month or so. But at the beginning of the year, what they did was they sent out a questionnaire whether the kids were going to ride the bus. So they knew how many riders they were going to have. And if that was going to change, you know, each semester or whatever changes they need to be made, that's what changed their, how many buses they needed. So that's the other point that we have to take into consideration, is that if for some reason we go into a change in where the kids are going to stay home for 2 days and not go in for, you know, for learning away from school, that takes into consideration how many buses we need.
Well, but if you're referring to the arrangement now with the number of days that the kids are in school, this budget is based on, we return to normal operations for FY '22, as opposed to any kind of hybrid education setup. Or
And do you know that if everybody is assigned a bus, they're welcome to go on the bus? As far as I know, the buses are still going with nobody, you know, only one per seat, and staggering where they're setting them and wearing masks and stuff. And because my point is that if all of a sudden we can only have 24 or 25 kids on a bus, and all of a sudden now we, you know, you have more than that, do we need to add another bus?
Mm.
That goes back to my original question. Who put the RFQ together? And what info did they use to put it together?
That would be Michelle, and she would get input from the building principals, because they would have to do some kind of a survey to figure out how many kids were on each bus.
Okay,
Because I had a parent ask me the other day, my kid is not assigned to the bus because we elected not to put him on the bus, but he has to take the bus today for some odd reason. And do I have to call the school and tell them that the kid's going to be on the bus? I said, well, what you could run into is if they've already assigned 24 kids or 25 kids to the bus, then you may not be able to put the kid on the bus.
And that's, again, based on restrictions that are in place now.
COVID,
Right.
yeah.
And this budget is based on none of these being in place for the next school year. So I would assume that the RFQ that goes out is based on standard capacity of the buses in question, not taking into account distance, one kid per seat or whatnot. That's my assumption, because that was one of the guiding principles going in, is that we're back to normal as of, you know, September 2021, which we can all hope for. But
So when they had to revise this year in how the kids were riding the bus, et cetera, did that reduce or increase the amount of trips that the bus companies were required to make in order to satisfy those social distancing rules? And I'm asking the question because if I'm a bus company and I took a big hit with, you know, over the past year, I would probably attempt to work something in as a minimum, right? As part of a new bus contract. It's like, look, you know, I'm committing to having X amount of buses available for your school system. If you tell me you don't need them, you know, halfway through, I still got to get paid for some of it. I don't know what that would look like, but I would be thinking about it from the other side. So, you know, all things being equal, if everything works perfectly and it looks like, you know, a full regular year, that's probably legit. If something changes, there's probably going to be I would assume there's some kind of a provision in there that has some kind of minimum payment to the bus companies for the commitments that they're making to us.
To my
Just like-
knowledge, you know, there was no buses. All they did was change the routes a little bit so that they could adjust each bus so that they could have the maximum kid. and they didn't have to add any buses or, delete any buses, just change routes a little bit.
Got it. Okay.
Mark, I had another question though.
Sure.
Are these vehicles going to be governed by the same policies as the buses? Like a camera or, anything like that?
That, I don't believe so. I mean, that wasn't mentioned in terms of cameras. But I can put that on my list for a
We
follow-up.
do have a policy for camera on a bus, and it saves, if anybody wanted to accuse a driver of, misbehavior.
Improper action.
Yeah.
Do all of the buses have, Howard, do they all have equipped with cameras now?
They all have Wi-Fi equipment on board, and you can get they can actually watch them as we're driving now because it's
Okay.
Wi-Fi.
Is it-
GPS, everything is GPS. And that would be another question is, do these vehicles have GPS? Are they going to have, the capability of having a camera on board? If they're using them for, in the past 10 years, the only ones I've heard of being accused have been special needs drivers being accused of mistreating the kids. So maybe they need, cameras on these two vans.
All right, well, I will, I'll get that information.
If they do, that's an added cost, of course.
Of course,
Of course.
everything's an added cost.
Yes.
All right, anything else on transportation before we switch to food? All right. We had an interesting discussion about food service. Obviously, the food service revenue numbers and needs have been disrupted a great deal by the virus and changes in plans. But again, going back to the guiding principle of the budget, that we're back to normal next year, that's what we're planning for. So John Lash walked us through the revenue streams and tweaks that have been made in the schedule to increase those, and how the revenue for the district from food service varies depending on what the kids actually buy. And the good news on that is what they prefer to buy is actually a much higher margin way of purchasing food. So that's good from a revenue standpoint, even though the idea is to incentivize buying. And the difference is that the prices are there to incentivize buying complete meals rather than a la carte sales. Here's a number for you. In terms of revenue, 90% of the revenue that we get is from a la carte sales, which includes snacks and partial meals or meal items as opposed to the entire meal. So that's 90%. He mentioned that 2 years ago, the lunch service time was cut by 50% and sales were down. He said from roughly 2,200 a day to 1,600 a day. Last year, to compensate for that, they offered food service until the last bus left. And that resulted in a revenue increase back up to about 2,000 to 2,100 a day, almost back up to where it was before, because what's being purchased at that time? It's those a la carte items that are high margin for the district. So so that is those are the parameters that they're working under. If we can get back to normal, we're back to the normal revenue stream, and that makes the food service self-sustaining, which is what we're really looking for in the budget, to net out to as close to zero as possible, or have a little net income.
Is there a policy that the incentive is supposed to drive to full meals, like the
Mhm.
from all the food groups, I guess?
Right.
And it's priced to incent that, but it sounded like you just said that kids don't have enough time to actually sit down and have a full meal. Perhaps, I don't know if that's a 15-minute problem or a,
I'm
Right.
not sure whether that's what's driving it or not. I think that you've got an à la carte menu that the kids can pick from, and that's what they often do. So just to be clear on the 90% number, that's not 90% of the sales are in that area. The revenue is 90%
revenue.
from that.
Right. And,
So
but you did mention when they cut the lunch period in half, they lost 800 meals a day. It went from the 2,400 to 1,600.
overall sales were down because there's less time to make purchases, and they didn't have the food service at that end of the day time period where the kids would be more likely to grab a snack.
Overall sales.
Right.
Overall sales. I thought I heard meals, like the full
No.
meals were cut. Okay.
No, that's overall.
Okay.
Overall sales numbers.
So there was an interesting conversation that I had in the curriculum subcommittee meeting, which is the school policy has been to book every student in every single period that's available across the day. There is no free time for any students. That was kind of a surprise to me because, my kids would take off for lunch and do other stuff when they were there. So I don't know if that's a different, and, way back in my day, it was, you kind of try to organize your schedule so you get out really early or show up really late. So I was kind of surprised about that. And, I'm wondering if that's the similar problem for from just looking at it from a food service standpoint, is no one has any free time to actually
Go and
partake
buy
in it.
something to eat. Right.
To get something to eat. I got 15 minutes or I got a half an hour and, to get lunch and do whatever else I want to do over the lunch period.
Well, I think that it could explain why making the food service available at the end of the day, where there is time when you're between the time the class ends and you get on the bus. And I think John mentioned that the salad bar is open and snacks are available, and so that's an opportunity to make a purchase, and the kids are taking advantage of that. So that would tie out with what you just said about the scheduling, and also explain the drastic reduction in revenues when the lunch service time is cut, because it can't be made up for
Anywhere else. Yeah.
anywhere else in the day.
So you're telling me they're going to be pushed for the full meals for next year?
I think they always have.
Is that the way I'm understanding it?
I don't think there's going to be a change there.
Oh,
The offerings
Right.
is going to continue. The full meal from a revenue standpoint, from a margin standpoint for the district, will be lower, but so it makes more sense to buy the full meal if you're the consumer. But we have consumers who may be quite disconnected from the funding source, shall we say. And you can burn through your account pretty quickly on these a la carte menus. And if somebody's simply replenishing it, hey, I'd buy more expensive lunches if I could get that deal.
It's all about the French fries.
Well, one of the things that's always eaten into the food service revenues is the fact that we have off campus. So often advisories will go for lunch somewhere, whether it's, I'm not sure they can do that during COVID times, but, they used to go to Panera, use their advisory and have it, butt up against lunch. So they had plenty of time. So obviously, if you have a choice between Panera or the cafeteria, you're going to pick that. Or, at one point they weren't even selling coffee. And of course, everybody was going to Dunkin' Donuts or whatever in advance. So they need to really think seriously about how to, and I think they do, about marketing themselves. And I love the idea that they're doing, say after school sales, because I always thought, kids are going to a sport or to an activity or something and they're hungry.
Yeah.
Why don't we take advantage of that? And then the other question, Mark, is there an effort to try and extend the lunch period so that they do have time to eat?
That's probably more of a curriculum question, but
It would be, from a food service standpoint, it's working with the time that they have. Changing the schedule would go back to curriculum. So we didn't discuss that,
Okay,
is my answer.
is,
Is
is,
this, is
is
this
that a
only
fair-
for Souhegan High School, or are we talking about the middle school also?
just Souhegan.
Just
just-
like,
Just Souhegan, okay.
is that kind of a conversation legit for this committee?
It's just a wonder.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
it ties into the food service budgeting and expectations clearly, but is that really? And I'm curious. Is that the role of this committee to say, well, are they, is this the right curriculum decision?
It's really hard to analyze a budget if you don't understand the operations.
I'm not saying about the operations. It's and that's how I tied it to the food service.
I think how long the lunch periods are is part of the operational part of food service, right?
Right.
If my son, I think earlier this year, he just started as a freshman. They actually cut the lunch period after the school year started, so it was a longer period the first few weeks.
I have a question for Mark. Mark, do you know how is it working this year with the grant for food service? And like, how will that look next year for us when we're looking year over year, any kind of comparison? Like, is that on the budget detailed out with this food service? Are they still giving free meals to everybody?
well, yeah, we talked about that, and yes, they are, but that is not going to be in place next year. When we look at the FY22 versus FY21, we're looking budget to budget, as opposed to, I mean, obviously the actuals are all screwed up as a result of this, and could be, but that could carry into next year, because this federally funded free breakfast and lunch program is causing a bit of a problem because of the funding that is based on the free and reduced lunch numbers. Because this program is in place, providing the free meals for everybody, it is resulting in less people signing up for the free and reduced lunch because it's automatically available. But that's only for this school year. That's going to end. And if we don't get the required signups for that, and I believe the cutoff has already passed. Yeah, it's October 1st. Title I funding is based on October 1st free and reduced lunch numbers. But because this free program had been put in place, I think it's causing a problem in terms of who is, entering to that program, which of course will continue for next year. So, but this program is not being, it doesn't have impact on the FY22 budget because it's going to be done by the time this budget kicks in.
Okay, yeah, just something to look at. I'm sure it's going to happen across all departments, but this is one where I'm sure it's a significant financial impact.
Well, yeah, obviously when the shutdown occurred at the tail end of the last school year, that's sales went to zero because no one was in school after everybody went home. So we did talk about that. The sales went away, but the staff stayed on. So there was a negative impact there in terms of actuals. For this year, I would imagine the sales are still going to be, well, the sales are going to be off because you've got these, or the revenue is going to be off because we're still providing the free breakfast and lunch from Souhegan, but that's a federally funded program. So for this year, I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but the funding source is different. So we're being paid to provide these meals as opposed to, getting the revenue stream coming in from whoever's going to be buying lunch. So, but I think that supposedly nets, I'm not sure whether that nets out as a net gain or loss in terms of the federal funding, but when we look at FY22, that all goes away. We're looking for a self-sustaining program, and the forecast is that we're going to have it based on the current parameters of when food service is available, what the margins are, what the sales rates are. Again, it's a projection, but John sees that it will be self-sustaining for FY22.
And is he the new food service guy, like 2 years or so, or is he an old?
John has been there 2 years or maybe 3 now. It
Okay.
used to be Danielle.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Because I remember that there was conversation about, trying to achieve self-sufficiency, and always was somewhat elusive. It's good.
Well, the virus screwed it up for this year, but apparently next year John thinks we'll be there.
Right, exactly.
Well,
Just
not
that-
only will we be there, but I got to throw in these notes here that, and I've heard about this in years past, and I don't know if we can compete with Panera yet, but I think we're a lot closer to it in terms of quality than other SAUs. We talked about the amount of quote from scratch cooking that's done, how many fresh products are used versus frozen, kind of commodity items that other districts would use. We use all locally sourced grass-fed beef, for example. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Black River Produce is used. That's the name of the company. And they provide a below wholesale rate to this SAU because they consider it a feather in their cap that they provide to a school district this size. So we're actually doing a lot more with higher quality food than other districts are. And I look at that and I think that, that could be an incentive in itself for it's not doesn't sound like the cafeteria food I was used to many years ago. So
Mark, do we still have a chef, which was unique to Souhegan to have a chef?
yes.
We do. Okay.
So yeah, somebody's got to turn all these great ingredients into some high quality meals. So there's some very positive things going on in terms of what is provided. I know we've hit our time limit here, but just quickly, there are no major new equipment needs in the food service budget. However, Stephanie, with her historical knowledge of these things, she asked the question, is the walk-in freezer still a problem? Well, it doesn't need to be replaced, but apparently it quits every so often and stops operating. Well, that could be disastrous if somebody doesn't notice it, if it were to happen at the beginning of a weekend. So we asked, is there some monitoring that we can get to make sure that temperature doesn't rise too much if it gets finicky one day? They were given an estimate of $2,000 from our existing security company to add that capability, which seems quite high for a simple temperature monitor. I know for a fact there are other less expensive options there. So that's something that is being looked at, but they're not looking to replace the freezer in this budget.
Is the maintenance performed on the freezer? Do we know that?
I believe so.
Is that something that is a facilities issue or a food service issue? In other words, that when your facilities guy, Jeannie, came up with a gigantic list of all the things that you needs to pay attention to, was the kitchen equipment on there? I know he had cleaning the
hoods.
right?
Yeah, I'll have to check on that. I don't recall, but I know that does fall probably under facilities.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, so I'll check into that.
Okay. Well, it's a little after 6 o'clock. I don't want to hold people up beyond the allotted time. I just want to recap a little bit. I still am left to give a report on the curriculum, and Howard, you have athletics and activities. I know you're just getting into the getting
I reached out to Pim before I got on this call, and he was getting ready to go to his SAU meeting. I mean, a Souhegan meeting. So he said we'd touch base this weekend. So I'll get something together and see if there's any questions.
Okay, and do you have access now to that spreadsheet?
As soon as we get off this line, I'll look online and see if I can get it.
Okay, thanks. And so we have another call set up for 6 o'clock on Monday, the 23rd. The last 2 hours, what I will try to do for everybody is I'll put together the form of a PowerPoint presentation, much like we did last year. Here's the high level, and then we can step through. And what I'd ask after Monday is to have you folks take your section of what you worked on and maybe do a couple slides in the PowerPoint presentation. And that's the document that we would use for discussion points at the board meeting on November 30th, when we're supposed to make our initial recommendation. After November 30th, we actually scheduled a workshop, another budget workshop, because we're assuming that through this process, they're going to start making changes to the budget, make some adjustments, and then there'll be a revision. And so we scheduled a joint budget workshop with the full school board and the full SAFC on December 7th from 6 to 8 p.m. So hopefully you have that on your calendar. I think I just got a calendar invite today. I might have forwarded to everybody because it looked like it was just to me. And then our final report is due to the SAFC on December 10th. So whatever we take away from that December 7th meeting, I assume we will try to shoot for some kind of a recommendation for the November 30th board meeting. There might be some open-ended issues still, and we'll try to wrap those up in between that and the December 7th workshop, and then just try to close it out by the December 10th timeline. And then the school board, I believe, votes on this budget on December 21st. So that's the schedule to go forward. Anybody?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I guess you're going to send us the input for December the 7th meeting, Joel?
I believe folks should have it by now, but John, you might be an exception.
I looked today, half an hour before we started. I haven't got it yet.
Okay. I traded emails with Brian Miller and Abby and Sue Ledger
I'm meeting
more than
Brian tomorrow.
3 times.
I'm meeting Brian tomorrow in
Okay.
person.
You're going to be all set after that.
I'm sure.
Let me just give you a heads up on stuff that I'm struggling with on the curriculum budget that can't get resolved yet. The salary expenses in the curriculum budget are going up 6.5%. When I look through the PPC agreement, that gigantic matrix that has, every, step, everybody gets a raise based on, seniority. Every year you get a step up. And then to the extent that you improve, you become more qualified by getting 10 college credits, you move over a lane and you get a raise for that. If everybody steps up 1 year, it works out to about 1.8% increase. If everybody, all the teachers in the school move over a lane, it's about a 1.2% increase, about 3% between the two, assuming everybody, moves up and gets a higher qualification. I can't get to 6.5%. I can, that's a 3% max, maybe 4.5. I can't figure, and we have fewer FTEs. I can't figure this
How
out.
about the increases in health insurance and?
This is straight salary.
How about admin? Is that including that?
Straight salary of the profession, the teaching professionals, 59.8 full-time employees. So I thought it might be some of the retirement payouts that they made. Doesn't show up in that line item. So I just give you the heads up because I'm really
Is
struggling.
that where they're putting the cushion for the budget?
I mean, I see it. I see it in the
The
budget.
danger is always under budgeting, right? That's worse than over budgeting. So
I mean, I see it in the budget, it all adds up, but I can't, and it's gonna have to be, I don't know where it comes from. I can try to
Okay, I see.
guess, but I just will give you the heads up because I haven't resolved that yet, and I'm not getting great
I had,
Feedback?
help on that.
I had
Yeah.
somebody ask me yesterday, how come the teachers are paying so much money for the ones that are subbing? So if you have a teacher that's remote learning or, teaching remotely, you have somebody else in that classroom to watch those kids. I heard that the pay was all the way up to $150 a day. So,
That sounds like a substitute pay.
right. So is that included? Is that the increase there?
Nope, that would be substitutes. That's not a big issue. Like I said, it's one of it's a mystery to me. At this point, I need to go through every single teacher and find out what's going on from one year to the next. Because I mean, it could be as simple as, well, 8 teachers retired last year. The expectation was we were going to save $108,000 because they were senior teachers and we're going to replace them with an average salary teacher. We could have actually replaced them with all but more expensive teachers. Could have happened.
Is that a
Can't track-
question is that a question you should ask Adam?
Oh yeah, and I've asked Michelle and I've asked Christine, and it's not easy going because you have to follow each individual teacher year to year, and then the ones that aren't there year to year, who replaced them. And this is Michelle's second year, and she's only implemented her position code device to be able to actually do that going forward, but she doesn't have it easily, readily available for going backwards to
It goes back to what I
2021.
said earlier though, Joel. If they replace that teacher with somebody else and that teacher that was replaced never moves, they get carried somewhere.
That might, yes, that's what I'm trying to figure out. That, because how do you justify to the taxpayers in the town that teacher salaries went up 6.5% year over year? That one's a tough. That's
I
a tough
mean,
one.
you definitely need to get an explanation from
Right.
somebody on that,
Yeah.
Joel.
I know.
So hopefully somebody's going to be able to.
I wish I could slice and dice this giant spreadsheet a little better than I'm currently capable of doing, but I'm learning little by little.
It seems like though it's really going to be up to Michelle, Adam, or Mike to
Figure that out.
explain it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. That was my confession for the day. And have a great weekend, everybody. And we'll see you on Monday at 6 o'clock.
Hold on, I'm going to say one thing.
Oh, thank you, Peggy.
Yeah, I'm going to put the minutes on the shared drive, and I don't know if anybody knows, because I don't. If I put it into the shared area, we're the only ones that can see it, right?
I don't even know that there's a shared area for us.
There definitely is. If you're in Google Mail and you look in the top, anyone who's got their Google Mail open,
Yeah.
if you look in the top right-hand corner, there's a 9 dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you
Yeah.
click that, click either the drive or the sheets. If you click drive, you get all of the files that we're sharing right now. If you click sheets, you'll get the budget sheet.
Interesting.
So I'm going to put the minutes in here, but I want to make sure we're the only ones that can see it, because before they're public, I'd like you guys to read them and approve them. And I'm like writing and typing like crazy out. And I just want to make sure, well, there's a lot of times we have a lot of discussion and I summarize it because I don't think we need details, but there's other times I put detail because I think it's something that if somebody isn't here, they're going to want to know. So for each of you, especially you, Jeannie, since you have been able to present the most so far, look and see if the points that I included are points that we want to share, or whether there's other things that are more important to share and things that we just had, we yapped for 15 minutes on that don't really need to be in here. So anyway, I'm going to post them in here. I'll send a link. You should be able to click my link from the email, go to that folder and find all the minutes. And then next time we'll finally go through them. And if anyone has any changes, you can either email me or add a comment, and we can finally get them all approved.
Great, thank
Okay.
you.
We'll try that one. I was gonna say, can you just send them to the SAFC blaster?
It's so much easier to, believe me, I've done this so many
Okay,
times. It's so much easier to hear. You're talking to someone who's done technical writing training for years. When you're looking for feedback, it's much easier to get feedback on one file. And it's super easy to read this way. I'm just going to send you a link. You click the link and you'll see it right there.
Awesome.
Then
Thank
we're
you.
all looking at the same copy.
Thank you for bringing me into the 2020s.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Well, like I said, the easiest way to see this really is just to click the 9 dots, and you're either going to be looking at the drive, or this is how I am getting to the budget now. If you click sheets, the shared budget will show up to you.
Yep.
All right, so anyway, I'm going to put them there. I'm going to assume we're the only ones that are going to see them. I'll send you a link, and then just give me any feedback, and we can finally get all 3 sets of minutes approved. Now
Sounds
that we
great.
all can get on our email and get on our folders.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully.
Thanks,
right.
Thank you.
everybody.
All right,
Bye.
thanks.
Okay,
Bye.